There was a time when York had a pub for every day of the year. Now it's down to rather less than half of that. But even so, there's a lot of them. And in this programme, we're going to look at pubs. We're going to look at pubs with stories. Between the Pennines and the Yorkshire coast, there's quite a few. We start here at the Black Swan at Peasholm Green, a pub that's got more than its fair share of spirits. It's an interesting old building, this, a timber-framed house, built about 1420, probably on the site and including an earlier house. It's got lots of historical associations. The Bowes family had it for something like 150 years. They provided Lord Mayors of York and of London. One of them gave York its sword of state in the middle of the 16th century. St. Margaret Clitheroe was allegedly seized here when she was taken away to be tried and pressed to death in the religious persecution. It's got associations too with General Wolfe of Quebec. His parents lived here after they were married. A place reeking with history. But it's ghosts we've come looking for. Let's go and see if we can find some of its famous spirits. Ah, here's Robert Atkinson, the landlord of the Black Swan. What have you got in the way of ghosts?
Downstairs in the dining room, the staff keep seeing a gentleman sat there who disappears from time to time and reappears.
A non-paying customer?
A non-paying customer, yes. We have a bedroom at the other side of the wall there, where a young boy is seen from time to time. There's a staircase at the far side of the building. There's a lady in grey. Because of the curve of the staircase, she's never seen as a complete person. It's just the lower half of the body is seen, and it's thought that she is probably dressed in a nun's outfit.
Good Lord. Do your customers come across the ghosts as well, then?
I think, actually, the age and the claims of the building itself do bring customers. Yes, we do get customers see them as well.
Well, do you think we could go and have a look round, see if we can see anything?
Certainly.
Right, let's go. After you.
Okay.
So, this is the bedroom, then, where the boy was seen, is it?
Yes, this is the bedroom.
Can you tell me what happened?
My father was sleeping in the bed at the time. He woke up early one morning and stood about where you are. There was a young boy. My father thought he looked about 12 or 13 years old.
Yeah.
And my father thought he must have been asleep at the time, but he wasn't. And the young boy started pulling out pictures from under the bed and holding them up for my father to see. And after a few seconds, my father thought he ought to say something, and as he started to speak, the boy disappeared.
Have you any idea what the pictures showed?
I did ask my father, but as he had just woken up, and I think he was so astonished at what was happening, he wasn't really looking at the pictures so much as he was bemused at the situation.
Very understandable, I would think. Well, let's go and see if we can find anything else interesting. This is the dining room, and members of the staff carrying meals through from the kitchen to the bar sometimes look over here and see a man about 60 wearing a brown suit and a hat sitting here. He looks just like a customer, apparently, and when they look again at him, he's gone. He's not as lucky as me. He doesn't get service. He certainly doesn't get this superb roast beef suet pudding. By gum, it's good as this. It really puts some body in you. Well, here I am again, and this time I'm facing a giant mixed grill. Look at that then. Gammon, steak, chop, mushroom, fried potatoes, baked potatoes, fried eggs, peas and a salad. And I suppose it's pretty appropriate. I'm at the Lonsborough Arms in Market Wheaton. And this is the town, of course, that produced William Bradley, the Market Wheaton giant. I'm sitting in his chair as well, but that's been cut down since his day to accommodate ordinary mortals. That's him behind me. He was born in 1787, part of a family of 13 children. And from the beginning, he was a big un. He was 14 pounds when he was born. He was 11 stone at the age of 11. And at 17, he weighed 27 stones and stood 7 foot 8 inches high. He grew another inch after that. Now, he was from an ordinary family. His dad was about 5 foot 9.5. He was a tailor. And all the children were normal size except William and one of the daughters, who showed every sign of being big as well, but she died at an early age. When he was put out to work, he worked on farms locally. And, as I say, he followed his dad, who was a tailor. His father had fields, and young William worked them as well. He coined the name for himself, the locomotive ladder, and he went round Market Wheaton doing odd jobs. He was very handy at roof repairs, I should imagine, and he was great for recovering lost footballs that had got lodged in the spoutings. When his size became remarkable and well known, he went into show business. He joined a Barnum-type circus and went on tour, and later he put on his own act. He arranged levees at which people were invited to come along and see him. He appeared before King George and his Queen and was obviously given a bit of royal patronage. At the time, there were quite a lot of these things on tour. In fact, just over the walls at Sancton, they grew the biggest pig in England, and that went on the road as well. But pretty soon he wasn't well. He developed tuberculosis and he became increasingly lame. And so he returned to Market Wheaton in his later years, where he seems to have been something of a recluse. He had a house built with a good big door, part of that's been filled in now, and he equipped himself for a quiet retirement. But sadly, increasingly lame, having knee trouble with supporting that great height, he had to use a crutch in his later years, and he died at the age of 33. Among the tangible relics of William Bradley's life is this large shoe from the Castle Museum in York. It's 15.5 inches long. You didn't get 3 of them in a yard. Anyway, I must give up giants and get on with this giant-sized meal I've got here. Well, that wasn't a bad snack. No wonder he grew to 7 foot 9. But when he died at the age of 33, there were considerable goings-on. But that's another story, and to get that, we have to go across the way to Market Wheaton Church. When William Bradley died in 1820, one of the great problems of the time was body snatchers, or resurrectionists as they were called. They supplied corpses for anatomical study, and William would have been a fine catch. But the villagers of Market Wheaton arranged a rather bizarre funeral at 5 o'clock in the morning and laid him to rest in the churchyard here. There must have been a fair lot of them in the know, because his coffin was 9 feet by 3 and they wouldn't handle that lightly. And having buried him, they put up a plaque on the wall there. And remember, William was tall enough to reach halfway up that plaque in his life, And later they moved him from his unmarked grave outside and buried him in the church. The locals say he's buried just about here. A big man in every sense of the word. A wet and windy day on the North York moors, about a couple of miles from Fylingdales. It's not unusual round here. This road's called Salter's Gate, been called it since the 14th century. And this is where they used to bring the pack horses and the wagon trains of salt from the pans at Whitby on their way to Pickering and York. This pub's called the Salter's Gate Inn, used to be the Wagon and Horses. They used to change horses here in the coaching days. Why, I bet a lot of travellers as well as wagoners were glad to see this place. One thing about the Salter's Gate Inn that you can rely on, they always have a good fire. And here is the famous fire. To my reckoning, it's been burning now continuously for 183 years, and it might have been going longer than that. And the reason it's kept going is because down there's somebody who needs to be kept warm and cosy. And if he doesn't, he gets up and walks about. There's reputedly a body buried under there, and he wants a certain amount of central heating to keep him happy. Now, it's an interesting story, this. I've only just heard it. But, of course, the idea of burying bodies in house walls goes back to the Stone Age. They were put there to act as protective spirits. Well, this chap's got a cosy fire, and it's kept running on turf, the local version of peat, if you like, and good logs to keep him happy. The whole pub, of course, dates back a long way. It was a 300-year-old building, and in the wall there's another link with the salt trade. That's one a little salt cupboard to keep your salt dry in humid weather. A nice idea. I think the salt's dry enough here, though, for my nice juicy beef sandwich. And what's beef without salt? Fish and chips at this pub, because I'm only a few hundred yards from the sea. It's the Dotterel at Reeton, on the Filey to Bridlington Road. And it's a pub named after a bird. If you're a naturalist and conservationist like I am, it's a barbaric story. This pub was built in the middle of last century to accommodate gamekeepers and others who came from all over the country to shoot them. Dotterel, little mountain plover that nested on the Pennines, in the Lake District, on the Scottish hills and so on. Year after year they came in the first fortnight of May, regular as clockwork. They called them the Dotterel Days. And the shooters came up here from elsewhere and locals as well. A local could get maybe 50 couple in the season, 100 birds. And the reason they shot them was not for food or anything basic. It was to use their feathers to make into trout flies. Orders came in, how many do you want, how many do you need? And of course they shot and shot and shot until the numbers began to fall. Then the collectors got into the act. They were getting rare, nearly extinct in Britain as a breeding bird. Everybody wanted one. And then suddenly in the 1890s, boom, they stopped coming. The trade declined to nothing. For decades, not a Dotterel appeared in the first fortnight of May on the Yorkshire wolds. The name, by the way, Dotterel, it's a good Anglo-Saxon expression. It means foolish. And by God they were. When one bird was shot out of the parties or flocks or trips, as they're called to be correct, the others didn't move. They just stood there and took it. So they were decimated. And after 1892, which as I remember it seems to have been about the last of the big years, the birds didn't come anymore. But now it's a different story. They're protected and the birds are beginning to come back. And of course the day of turning these little beauties into trout flies is long gone. It's a sad story in many ways, but it's nice to think it'll never happen again, that people will gather here in the Dotterel Days to shoot these little birds. All they'll do is look at them like I'm doing now, as curiosities of an odd past. And thank goodness we've got conservation these days. Well, I must get on with my fish and chips. Silence in court or you won't get a pint. I'm at the Black Bull at Birstall, about 2 miles up the road from Batley. And it might seem strange to you, but this is a pub with a courtroom on its first floor. Now, the pub was built about 1650, and through the 18th century and up to about 1830, there was this little courtroom on the first floor. Apart from dispensing beer, they also dispense justice here. The figure of justice blindfolded still remains. It was used as a coroner's court too, and it's handy for the churchyard if there were any bodies to dispose of. It was used for small crimes as far as we know. Things like rows between neighbours, straying animals, domestic disputes, probably loitering with intent, trespassing in search of conies and that sort of thing. Don't forget, this was in the day when stealing a rabbit could get you a trip to Australia, and stealing a sheep could get you a trip to York and the drop of York. So it was a full-time, rather small court. Serious cases would be referred to the assizes. It's an area full of history, this, and I'm sure the pub's seen a great deal of it. The Brontes had a connection here, and the Reverend Patrick, father of the famous girls, preached sermons at the church just across the road, and no doubt he nipped in here for a quick one from time to time. And I think it will be interesting now to go and see if they can live up to their reputation for pies and pasties as well as for justice. Ah, that looks good. Hello, I see you've added mushy peas.
Yes, we have now, yes.
Well, Michael Dobson, you're the landlord here now. Have you been here long?
No, just for the last 2 years.
Oh, yeah. Well, I see you've added a lot of photographs since I was last here.
Yes, well, the idea was when I first come in here that I wanted a few pictures of the Black Bull as it was many years ago. And as far as that's concerned, the one in the far corner there was the oldest one I could find.
Ah, when was that thing?
It was about 1910.
Well, it's still recognisable,
Oh,
but
yes.
just.
There's a slight difference, is there? There's the stables at the end of the building there and the next
gone
doorway.
now, have they?
Oh, yes, yeah.
What's this?
Well, that photograph is the main street in Birstall itself, near the marketplace.
Is that Low Lane?
That's right,
Good
yes.
Lord, my
Yes.
God, that's changed a bit, hasn't it?
Well, I don't think you'd be able to stand in the middle of the road like that now.
I see you've got Joseph Priestley.
Yes, well, of course, Joseph Priestley was born in Birstall, and of course he was recognised for discovering, one of the members who discovered oxygen.
Yeah, he started off with his phlogiston theory, didn't
That's
he? He was
right,
a bit
in
of a
the bog.
politician as well, wasn't he? He wasn't too popular at times.
No, if I remember rightly, his house was burnt down by rioters in London at one time.
I'm not surprised. What are those characters doing on that one up
Well,
there?
they're opening St John's ambulance box at the corner of one of the main roads, which was used in case of any accidents.
It was a big event, obviously. How do you find your customers enjoy this? I mean, it's like sitting in a local history gallery as well as a pub. It's great,
yes,
really.
That's the idea, that the people around about now are interested in it as Birstall as it used to be. And we find that this has interested all the locals. They come in and, like you say, you have a pint and a pasty and then go have a look at the photos.
Well, I can recommend it. Your pasties are still on form.
Thank you very much.
Ah, that was grand. Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure, Michael.
Well, onward, ever onward. Hello, Cat. How are you, eh? Having a sit out in the rain, you're a beauty. Nice village, this. Burley Woodhead, hanging on to the fringes of Ilkley Moor. Interesting pub as well, the Hermit. There aren't many pubs with that name. Pretty formidable character. Looks a bit bad-tempered to me, though. It's a funny name, anyway. Good morning.
Good morning.
Can I have a pint of beer, please? Bitter. Do you serve food?
I'm sorry we don't.
Oh, that's a relief. But I think I'd better have a bag of crisps anyway.
Would you like plain or cheese and onion?
Oh, cheese and onion, please, if there's a choice. You've got a pub with an unusual name.
Yes.
How much do I owe you?
69p, please.
69 pence. I think that should be right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. There's not much call for hermits these days. They were a pretty reclusive lot mainly, usually for religious reasons at one stage, but they did become quite fashionable. During the 18th, early 19th century, when people were building follies and grottos and things like that, it was the thing to have a hermit. Didn't cost much to keep, and he lived in whatever cave, grotto or similar you could provide for him, and they seem to have been quite trendy. But this hermit, Job Senior, was a man who had a fairly hard time. He was born about 1780, apparently the illegitimate son of a wealthy landowner at Ilkley. His mother struggled and raised him, and he became a farm labourer. Then he inherited money from his father's estate and really went on the spree. Seems to have lived it up for quite a long time. At the age of 60, with an eye to the future, Job decided to get married. And he married an 80-year-old widow, hoping, no doubt, to inherit a cottage one day. Well, in the fullness of time, she died. But her relatives descended, stripped the house of its goods and chattels and demolished the cottage, so Job had nowhere to go. He took to the hills and became a hermit, living in a cave somewhere along the edge of Ilkley Moor. And he made himself a little living by singing songs and making predictions in pubs. I don't know what he predicted, but among his good advice was that to young men, stay away from marriage. Well, that's the story of Job Senior, a genuine hermit, one who lived his life the hard way. Here's to Job Senior. Well, this is the last pub and this is the last meal. And since it might be my last meal, I'm making it a good one. I'm having steak. The pub's the Busby Stoop, near Thirsk, and it's got a good story. Around the beginning of the 18th century, very much in the first year or two, a man called Daniel Orty lived just down there at Danety Hall. His daughter Elizabeth married one Thomas Busby. Now, Orty was a clothier, but he also seems to have been a coiner, presumably making counterfeit coins and doing a little bit of edge clipping for the bullion. And his son-in-law Busby was in the act with him. After a year or two, during which time Busby had a fair old reputation as a layabout, one of his favourite occupations on a daily basis was sleeping in his chair, the two men fell out. And Busby strangled Orty and buried his remains in a wood where they were found a week or so later. Well, true to the times, Busby was hanged for his crime. He was hanged just out there on the crossroads where he good spot for a gallows to be in those days. And when he died, or before he died, he cursed whoever sat in his chair. I presume he was trying to get Orty into the business of being dead as well. Anyway, they hung Busby out there in chains, and his body took on a contorted position, and it became known as the Busby Stoop, and that's the name of this pub today. Well, of course, the chair went from hand to hand with this rather sinister curse hanging over it. And like these stories do, it grew legs. And anybody who'd sat in the chair and eventually died, as everybody does, began to get tied in with the chair, and so the chair was looked upon as a fatal thing to have around. It lasted a long time, this business, it appears, because at the time of the last war, when some people's lives were sadly short anyway, the chair began to accelerate in its legendary reputation. So much so that it's gone from the pub now. It's down the road in Thirsk Museum, hanging up in an impossible position for everybody to sit in. So there's not going to be any nasty accidents there unless they involve contortionists. Well, it's a good story, but I suppose every pub has one. You ought to go down to your local and see what theirs is. I must say, if that chair were here, I wouldn't mind sitting in it. I don't go for this superstitious nonsense. But since it isn't, I'll carry on where I am, nice and comfortable, knowing full well that nothing bad can happen to me.